Alrighty, in this video we are going to be kind of stylizing our blog and our page just a bit more based on all the HTML and CSS that we've just learned. So how about we start off just by designing the navigation. So typically you have a logo and then you have the menu item over here to the right. So we know that we want the menu items just to be home and blog. Maybe we'll also add a new page and call this contact.html, and we'll add that there. Contact, and the H1, maybe we'll put that right down here at the bottom. I'm going to kind of clean up some of this content, and I'll just remove all this stuff that we just went over. So let's remove that there, and we're going to add the navigation. So I'm just going to add a div, and I'm going to give this a class of, we'll just call this nav. And inside of here is where we will have our logo and then our navigation. So for our navigation, I'm going to use a new HTML tag called nav, and this is typically used for navigation. There are a bunch of other HTML5 tags that you can use. I would probably even just do a search for HTML5 tags and you can learn up all about them. So here is HTML semantic tags. We have article, aside, details, and there's just a lot more tags that you can use, and these were introduced in the new HTML5 standard. But if you wanted to, you could always just stick with divs and spans and just use the typical elements that we went over in these videos, and then later on you could learn more about these HTML5 elements. So you can see here that we also have like a header element, so maybe we could swap out this div right here and just call this header. And then we probably want to have the closing header right there. And we'll also need, put this H1 outside of here. Okay, and then we want to wrap our nav right here. And let's also add a logo. So maybe we'll just make a link and just make this go to the home page. So we're just going to call this awesome site. So that will be our logo, but you could always put an image there if you wanted to. Typically on a website, you'll have an image for your logo. So let's put that there. And then we need to stylize this a little bit. So I am just going to clear out all the HTML that we've been working with. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to just set body, or HTML and body, padding to 0 pixels and margin of 0 pixels. And this is also referred to as just resetting your HTML and CSS. There is actually a style sheet called reset.css that some people include in their project, and it basically just removes all the default padding and margin for typical elements in your page. So we have that there. We know that we want our header to be full width, and then we also have an A link here. So I want the nav actually to have a flex box, so that way the items are aligned right next to each other. And I'm going to make the header full width. And then inside of here, I think I'm going to give it a class of container. And this container I'm going to set to maybe a max width of, maybe we'll say like 1200 pixels. And you'll see this pretty often. You'll see like a container. This way the page kind of flows really nice together. Let me go ahead and show you an example of maybe even W3 schools. Like this could probably be considered a container, like this area right here. This page is full width, so it may not be the best example, but typically a container will be a fixed size. So let's go back here. And I know that I want my container to be a fixed width. So we'll say that the header is going to be a width of 100%. And then the header, we could say .container, but we're not going to be that specific because we're going to use this .container class in a bunch of different places. So we're going to say .container. We want to have a max width of 1200 pixels. And we want to give it margin of 0 pixels and auto. This way it is centered. So let's go back and look at this. So we know that we want actually our container to have a flex. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new class just called flex. And then in here, I'm going to say dot flex. So any element with a class of flex, we're going to say display flex. Now what I like to do is I kind of like to just save it, reload the page, and then kind of see what I'm working with. So it doesn't look like that the items are actually aligned correctly. So we have awesome site, home, blog, contact. So let me go ahead and just inspect this. So we have our container, and it looks like the container has a max width of 1200 pixels. Yeah, I may need to make this a bit wider. Okay, so now you can see that our container has a width of 1200 pixels, and we want the content inside to be justified between, because we want the home, blog, and contact to be over here on the right. So let's go ahead and say inside of our flex, we're also going to say justify content. We're going to say space between. And then we're also going to say align items center. So we want the space to be between them, and then we also want to align it based on the height. So let's set height to, we'll say 100%, and then we want our header to have a fixed height. Maybe we'll just say 60 pixels. And how about I add a background color for our header, just that way we can see kind of the height and how everything is aligning. So I'm going to make this kind of a gray color. Now if we reload that, now that looks quite a bit better. So we have our logo over here, and then we have home, blog, and contact. So I think I want to clean up these links a little bit and add some margin left right there. So we will say for our header, and this is how we can get specific with our elements. So we'll say inside of our header, the nav inside of there, and every single A link, we want that to have a display block, and then we want to have a margin left, and we'll say 5 pixels. So let's reload that, and actually we don't want display block. Maybe we want inline, and we reload, and now we have the space in between. And I actually don't like it having the underline, so how about I remove that? So we'll say text decoration none. Let's reload, and now we don't have those underline. And I also want to apply a different font family. I like to actually use the system fonts. So let me just do a search for system fonts CSS. And here at CSS Tricks, we have the system font stack. And what this will actually do is it will default to the system fonts on your machine. So if you are on a Mac, it uses a specific, I think it's like San Francisco or some name of that font. If you're on a Windows device, I think that may be Roboto. I'm not exactly sure which one it is, but it's going to use the default font based on your system. And this actually looks pretty nice. So let's add that font family there. And let's take a look at our web page. And you can see that that looks quite a bit better. And even the logo right here too. So maybe I want the logo just to be black. And then maybe we want these to have some different colors as well. And I think I'll take off this gray background and add just a border right there. So let's go to our index right here. And I know that I want my header to have a border bottom. So I will take off the background. Actually, maybe I'll just add border bottom. Say 1 pixel, solid. And I want this to be a very subtle, maybe not even that dark. I want it to maybe be like, well, we'll just say DE, DE, DF. I like to give my colors a little bit of blue, and that's not gonna, you're not gonna see much from that. I could always change it to E5. So remember, it's red, green, blue. So it's red, green, and blue. So how about I save that and reload, and you can see that it's very faint, but you can see that border bottom, and I think that looks pretty slick. So let's change the logo. And before I do that, I think I'll just give this a class of logo. And let's go back here and add those styles. Okay, so I want the font weight to be bold. Text decoration, I don't want that to be underlined, so I'm going to say text decoration of none. And you'll see that sometimes this IntelliSense can kind of be a pain in the butt, but it can also be very helpful, so we'll keep it on. And maybe I want the color We'll just do a solid black. And that looks pretty cool. So now you can click here to go back to the home page, or you can go to the home, blog, and contact right here. So let's change up these styles just a little bit. So we'll say for the A link, instead of it just being those default colors, we want to have a color of blue, and that looks pretty good. And maybe we want the font weight, and we can also use a color value from like 100 through 900. So I could say maybe 500, and it's not going to be as bold as the logo right here, but it's still going to be a little bit thicker than the default font weight. Okay, so now we have our home page. Let's go ahead and add that container right here inside of the main content. And you'll see this is where you would add all the content for your homepage. So you could say, welcome to my homepage, tell a little bit about yourself. So I'll add a paragraph here. I'll just say, if I could type, welcome to my awesome website. Feel free to have a look around and visit my blog, and I'll link to the blog right here. Okay, so let me reload that, and now you can see we have our homepage. Welcome to my awesome website. Feel free to have a look around and visit my blog. Now check this out. If we click blog, oh, let me make sure that that is actually linking up correctly. Let's see, where do we have this? Yeah, I think I need to not include that /, so we'll just say blog. If I click on the blog, you're going to see that we actually don't have, if I minimize that, any of the styles that we have in the original page. So we also need to apply these same header to these other pages. And right now, the way that you're going to have to do this is you're just going to have to copy and paste it into every single page. And that's because we're not working with dynamic web pages yet. We're just working with static pages. And once we get into learning more about Node.js and PHP and other backend programming languages, you can then include this, and then every time you make a change, it will change throughout every other page. But since we're just building a website with HTML and CSS, you can't create these dynamic web pages. And that's really where a lot of the magic happens. But having a good foundation of HTML and CSS is super important for progressing your skills as a web developer and learning more about backend development and dynamic websites. So enough with that, enough with my rant. Let's go ahead and save that, take a look at the blog. And did I move that in the correct space? So we have our header. Yeah, so there we have the logo, and we can go back to the home and to our blog. And I probably want to wrap this inside of a container. So I can take off this, and you actually see I have the container right there, which is perfect. So I can say class equals container. Okay, so we wrap that in the container, and we don't need this content down here. So let's go back here and reload. It says, welcome to my blog, and we have title of post here, and we can click here to view every single post. So we can go back to the home, to the blog, and then we can also click here to read more about this specific post. So if we go there to read more, of course, we don't have that header, so we're going to have to include that just like we did for the blog. So let's include this header right here. We'll include this in post 1, and we'll wrap the content inside of the container. And you'll see that, the magic of creating dynamic websites is just going to come in handy, because I feel like there's just no way that you're going to, copy and paste the nav, and then every time you make a change, you have to go back through every single page and change the navigation. Having it dynamic, you can just change it in one spot, and then it changes across the board. So there we have blog 1 or post 1, and then we'll do post 2, wrap this in a container. And sorry, you're probably seeing that this is off screen. How about I make this a bit wider? Maybe I zoom in a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, and I usually like to format. You'll learn that formatting the page can make it look a lot nicer. So inside of my container, I have the H1, these A links actually that I need to remove. So I'll probably remove that from post 1 as well. We don't need those links. Okay, and the last page, blog, post 1, post 2. Okay, maybe we didn't have a post 3. Okay, so that's good. We go back here to our blog, click here on read more, and we're not getting those styles over. And I believe that's because we didn't include the style sheet inside of our post pages. So you'll see for the index, we did include the style.css. And for the blog, we included the style.css as well. So we need to do the same for each post. And this is going to be the same case once you have a dynamic website. Everything will have like the same header content. It will have all the links and everything. So you don't have to make sure that you include it in every page, because they are going to all render from the same template. So let's go back here to our post. And now you can see that we can go to our home. We can then navigate to the blog, and we can navigate to a specific blog post. So how about we create the contact page? And then I think we'll wrap it up with this video. And then in the next course, we're going to learn about JavaScript and adding a little bit more of functionality. You can add click functionalities. You can loop through things, run if-else statements, and it'll just make your website a bit more dynamic. So let's go ahead and create this contact page. So we'll just maybe duplicate, how about the index.html? We'll say new file, contact.html, and we'll paste that in there. And we'll change the title to contact me. And let's say awesome site, home, blog, contact. We want to have the same header in there. Contact me. And then we'll put some info inside of here. Hey, you can contact me on Twitter at, and then I'll post my Twitter link, twitter.com/TNYLEA. And I'll post that there. And you can feel free to give me a follow if you would like as well. So let's go to the contact page. And sure enough, you can say, hey, you can contact me on Twitter at TNYLEA. And that will actually go to my Twitter page. So typically you want people to navigate in a new tab. So again, we could specify a new tab by saying target equals _ blank. And now if we go here and reload, the user clicks on that, it's going to open up in a new tab. This way they can always go back to your website. And you're seeing that actually whenever I click on the logo, this is just going to the main root where it's just displaying all the content in the folder at the root of my machine. So I need this to navigate to the index.html. So this is where you're going to see is a big pain point. So I have to update this in every single page. And again, I feel like I've said this over and over, but once we add dynamic functionality to our web page, then we won't have to do all of this stuff here. We could just change that in one place and it would update across the board. Okay, so go back, reload. We can click here and now we actually go back to the home page. So we have what looks like a fully functional blog. There's just lorem ipsum on there, but you can see that you can go to the blog, to the home, to the contact, and you can click the logo and go back to the home page. So there are quite a few CSS properties that I didn't fully cover in this video. And we'll probably, as you learn more, you're going to learn about all these different properties and values. And there's going to be new ones introduced. The best way to get good at them is just to start learning the basic ones and then just continually learning more and more. Let me go ahead and just show you one more. So let's say that I wanted each of these posts to have a border, and then I wanted it to have a rounded border, and then maybe even a box shadow. So let's stylize this up a little bit. So going back to our blog, and in this container, I'm also going to add flex here. So if I reload that, you can see that they're all flexed together. And maybe for each dot post, I want to have a little bit of padding. So I'm going to say dot post. We'll do a padding of 5 pixels, and that looks quite a bit better. Actually, maybe we want margin of 5 pixels and padding. So we'll reload that. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and add a border around H1. So we'll say border of 1 pixels, solid, and I'll just do this gray border. Oops, go back to the blog, and you can see that we have this border here. So now if we wanted this border to actually have rounded corners, we can use border radius. And this we can specify in pixels. We can say like border radius is 10 pixels, and now you can see that we have those rounded corners. So maybe we also want a box shadow. So to give this a little bit of depth, we can use box shadow. We can say 0 pixels, 10 pixels, and 3 pixels. And then we can give it a specific color. So for the color, we're actually going to give it an RGBA as opposed to RGB, because the A stands for alpha. So remember, with RGB, you specify red, green, blue from 0 to 255. So we're just going to say 0, 0, 0. So that'll be a black color. And we want the alpha or the opacity to be 0.1. So this is going to be a very subtle box shadow. Actually, not too subtle. So you can see that it kind of adds that box shadow right there. Let's change this to 0.05. And how about we change this to 3? Okay, so now you can see that that's a very subtle box shadow right there. And maybe I also want the border to be a little bit more faint, kind of like the border right here. So we'll add the same one, say. So we'll add that border. And yeah, that's looking pretty nice right there. And you can see that we added padding right here, but we may need to add a little bit more. So we have padding of 5. Yeah, if we were to change that padding to maybe like 30, that might look quite a bit better. So we could say padding of 30 pixels. And now we reload, and now our blog looks quite a bit nicer. We can click here to read that post, and then go back to the blog, and then back to our homepage. So again, like I said, there are going to be a ton of these new properties that you're going to need to learn, like the border radius and the box shadow, and all of that's going to come over time. If you want to find out how to do something, just Google it, and you'll probably find a new property that you can use in your CSS, and then you'll just have to get familiar with it and kind of play around with it and see what looks best to you. But that is it for this first HTML and CSS series. In the next series, we're going to be learning about JavaScript. And like I was saying, JavaScript allows you to add a little bit more dynamic functionality to your website. So I hope you enjoyed learning HTML and CSS. This is really going to be the foundation of where everything else is going to be built upon. So make sure that you get very familiar with it and just kind of have some fun creating some websites, designing things, putting things here and there, and just learning more about web design and web development. So until I see you in the next series, I hope you have a good one, and I will talk to you soon.